Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss an interesting article which tied together what many see as problems with the Labour budget raising the national insurance rate for employers' contributions and what people see as high levels of immigration in a way which almost cancels each other out. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So I'm not going to discuss the various pros and cons of policies on immigration and income taxations in this video. I've done that before, we'll no doubt do it again. This is more discussing a point of view, which is not necessarily mine, but how two very different policies can mesh together, whether for good or bad. What I'm doing in this video is just explaining how they link without really passing comment, which is most unusual for me, but it's because whether it's good or not, it might be, but I think only if handled in the best interest of the public, which often doesn't happen. So let's go over the main issues really quickly on national insurance and immigration. So national insurance first. Type of tax payable on most types of income, though not all. If you are an employee, you pay a certain percentage and your employer pays a certain percentage as well. Earlier this year, the Conservatives cut the employees' national insurance rate twice in order to do two things. First, to offer a quick tax cut bribe to voters. Second, to lay a funding trap for Labour. They knew Labour were going to win the election, so this was a way of blowing a hole in their budget. They'd be forced to either cut their spending plans, meaning that they would struggle to get the economy moving, to say nothing of annoying the core voters who wanted those spending plans, or they would have to raise other taxes, knowing full well that Rachel Reeves would have had limited scope for doing so. And indeed, Labour did raise those taxes, sort of, and they have proved in some cases quite unpopular. One of the big ones, in fact, the big one, they increased the employers' contributions on national insurance to compensate for the cut on employees' contributions. Now, in terms of pure economics, it would arguably be better for Labour to say that they were going to revert the tax cuts from this year, but then not go above that. So rather than saying we won't put national insurance up on working people, what they could have said is, look, the Tories can't actually afford these tax cuts, so we're going to put them back, but we will not go above that level. However, they clearly thought, rightly or wrongly, I don't know what the evidence was, that this was too risky. So instead, they've increased the burden on employers, although they have offered more generous tax breaks for very small businesses who only have a few employees. So they're quite happy. But for most businesses, the cost of hiring and employing has now gone up, which is likely to result in more caution on creating new jobs for some businesses and potentially suppress wage growth for some as well. It was a move not welcomed by business groups, as you'd imagine. They are saying it will mean they won't be creating as many jobs in the future, with retail particularly bullish about this forecast. And this sounds like a bad thing. However, there was an interesting perspective in the Financial Times. Now, I like the FT because unlike almost the whole of the rest of the mainstream media press, they don't need to pander to certain prejudices in the way they report things. In fact, their target audience just wants the unvarnished truth. That being said, you do have to exercise caution on certain topics because that target audience is the investment and banking community, and what's best for investors isn't always what's best for the rest of the population. And I thought this article was going the same way when I started to read it, attacking, for example, the policy to abolish non-dom states. I thought, here we go, making arguments that we should be taxing the ultra-rich less than I would consider sensible. But then it moved on to how you square the circle of the budget potentially restricting jobs growth, which is going to be bad for the economy, and we want to get the economy moving, with immigration. Because much of the population thinks immigration is too high. Now, for the purpose of this video, it doesn't matter whether it is or not. People think it is. After all, how could they not when the Tories have been posting record high numbers of net migration since Brexit, which was supposed to reduce levels? And I'm not talking about asylum here. That's a tiny number of people and it gets blown out of all proportion by the far right and it's got absolutely nothing to do with this video. Totally separate issue. I mean the bulk of immigration, basically economic migration. Labour are insisting that immigration was too high under the Tories. Now, the implication of that is that it will be lower come the next general election. Unlike the right-wing parties, Labour are insisting it is stupid to set a cap on immigration, that we should have as much immigration as we need, but they are nonetheless saying that the levels they inherited from the Tories were too high. But then people like me will counter, well, look, we've got more jobs available in the UK than we have people of working age. Yes, we know some people do more than one job, which is also not ideal for them. We also have a lot of working age people not in work, either because they're rich enough to retire early, or they have illnesses which are not being treated very quickly, or they have disabilities, or for some other reason. If we don't increase immigration, then we're actually not going to grow our economy at all. If you can't fill those vacancies, the work doesn't get done, our productivity is lower than our potential. So you've got a situation where you've got like the national insurance thing is like, okay, well, this could restrict growth. Then you've got the immigration policy. Well, this could restrict growth. But you could, in theory, collide them together and not. How does this work? Well, in theory, I mean, we could reduce immigration actually without hurting productivity if we rejoin the single market. But that's not happening anytime soon, no matter what anyone thinks. So how does this link up with the national insurance move? Well, the argument goes, so we need more workers in the public sector. I don't think anyone really argues against that, apart from the Tories. The public sector will not be paying the extra national insurance, and the government want to make wages more competitive in order to attract more workers. If the private sector think they can maintain productivity with fewer workers, you know, new technology like self-service checkouts, let them. The simple mathematical way of describing this is if we can reduce the number of jobs in the country without hurting productivity and without making unemployment go up, then the amount of economic immigration you need is lower. Now, like I said, if this would result in lots of people finding themselves out of job, like I say, the unemployment going up, that'd be a really bad idea. However, if they were instead just getting different jobs, if the employment levels were basically the same, we had technically full employment, so you move them to places where we've got large vacancies, it all evens out. You end up not harming your economy, but also not needing as many foreign workers. And the only query from my point of view is, will the jobs that people move to pay as well? Because it's not really a great policy if it means expecting people to pay the price for lower immigration, which granted the public want, in the form of lower pay themselves. But with the increases in minimum wage and public sector pay, with more to come, could be argued that this will put pressure on the private sector to pay better if they need those workers, particularly for the lower paid workers. And if they think they can do without them, it means those employers, including public services that are struggling, will happily take those workers off their hands and the level of immigration goes down. Now, obviously, another big caveat here is you'd have to make sure that the jobs being lost in the private sector are in the same places as we need more workers in the public sector, because you can't expect someone to get a job 200 miles away. But the specific point actually that was made in the article is you actually would want fewer people working in an Amazon warehouse or a supermarket checkout and more people working in the NHS or social care. And I can be persuaded of that argument because Amazon are shit employers after all. Because remember, from the public's point of view, they don't really care about the type of immigration. They just think number too high. So if we end up with large levels of immigration in some sectors of our economy, but less in others, but the overall number goes down, Labour will be able to sell that as a win at the election. The difficulty will be in recognising the reasons why people think immigration is too high. So the public don't have a number in mind. They're told that immigration is the reason why it's difficult to access housing, healthcare, social care, well-paid jobs. So even if Labour do reduce immigration figures, if people still feel that access to those things remains elusive, they will still conclude that whatever the figures are, they're too high. So I guess what Labour need to do is make sure they can improve access to the shortages which populists blame on immigration, and then post lower immigration as figures as well, and then link the two together to persuade people, look, the levels of immigration are clearly now sustainable because you've now got access to these things that were previously you were being deprived of, and you won't have to worry about the issue anymore. Now, obviously, that is not going to work on the ones firmly in the grip of the politics of Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson and so on. But those are relatively few in number. So two policies which on the face of it sound individually bad for the economy could in theory be made to cancel each other out, at least partially, if done correctly. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.